The morning sun cast long shadows across the cobblestone courtyard of Kensington Palace as Catherine stood by the tall windows of their private quarters. Her fingers traced the cool glass while she watched the early autumn leaves dance in the gentle breeze. Today would mark the beginning of a separation that neither she nor William had anticipated when they first took their vows years ago. William's diplomatic mission to the Commonwealth nations would take him away for 6 months. It wasn't just any ordinary trip. The Queen herself had specifically requested his presence to strengthen relationships with several member countries during a particularly delicate time in international relations. The responsibility weighed heavily on his shoulders, but the thought of leaving Catherine behind made his heart ache in ways he hadn't expected. "The car will be here in an hour," William said softly as he entered the room, his voice carrying a mixture of duty and reluctance. Catherine turned from the window, her eyes meeting his with a gentle smile that didn't quite hide the sadness beneath. She had been preparing for this moment for weeks, yet now that it was here, everything felt surreal. Catherine walked toward him, her steps measured and graceful despite the turmoil in her heart. "I've packed your favorite tea," she said, trying to keep her voice light. Mrs. Henderson made sure to include enough for the entire journey. William smiled at the mention of their longtime housekeeper, who had become like family to them both. They had spent the previous evening going through his itinerary together, discussing each stop and the significance of every meeting. Catherine had listened intently, offering suggestions and asking thoughtful questions that reminded William why her counsel meant so much to him. Her background in art history had given her unique insights into the cultural aspects of his diplomatic visits, and her natural warmth had helped him prepare for the more personal interactions he would face. "Promise me you'll call every evening," Catherine said as she straightened his collar, a gesture that had become second nature over the years. "I don't care about time differences or official protocols. I need to hear your voice." William placed his hands over hers, feeling the familiar comfort of her touch. "I promise," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "And you must promise me you'll take care of yourself. Don't let the official duties overwhelm you while I'm gone." Catherine nodded, though they both knew she would throw herself into her work to keep busy during his absence. The sound of footsteps in the corridor indicated that his security detail was preparing for departure. William's private secretary knocked gently on the door before entering with final documents that required his signature. As he reviewed the papers, Catherine retreated to their bedroom to fetch a small wrapped package she had been hiding. When William finished with the documents, he found Catherine sitting on the edge of their bed, holding something in her hands. "I wanted to give you this before you leave," she said, extending the gift toward him. William unwrapped it carefully to reveal a silver compass with their initials engraved on the back, along with the date of their wedding. "So you'll always find your way back to me," Catherine whispered, her voice barely audible. William felt his throat tighten as he held the compass, its weight somehow representing the gravity of their temporary separation. He pulled Catherine close, breathing in the familiar scent of her perfume, trying to memorize every detail of this moment. "Catherine," he began, but she placed a finger gently against his lips. "Don't say goodbye yet," she said. "We still have the drive to the airport." William nodded, understanding that she needed these final moments together to stretch as long as possible. They made their way downstairs where the palace staff had gathered to see William off. Mrs. Henderson dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief, while the younger staff members tried to maintain their professional composure. William shook hands with each person, thanking them for their service and asking them to take special care of Catherine while he was away. The black car waited in the courtyard, its engine running quietly. William's luggage had already been loaded, and his protection officers stood at respectful distances, giving the couple as much privacy as possible in their final moments at home. Catherine linked her arm through William's as they walked slowly toward the vehicle. 6 months isn't forever," Catherine said, more to herself than to William. "We've been apart before." William squeezed her arm gently, remembering their early courtship when military duties and royal obligations had kept them separated for weeks at a time. But this felt different somehow. They were older now, more settled in their relationship, and the thought of sleeping alone in their shared bed seemed unbearable. As they reached the car, William turned to face Catherine fully. The morning light caught the highlights in her hair, and he noticed the way she was trying so hard to be strong for him. Her chin was raised with determination, but her eyes betrayed the depth of her emotions. He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs gently brushing away tears she hadn't realized had begun to fall. "I love you beyond measure," William said, his voice steady despite the storm of feelings inside him. Every sunrise I see, every sunset that paints the sky, I'll be thinking of you and counting the days until I can hold you again. Catherine's composure finally broke, and she allowed herself to cry openly for the first time since they had learned about his mission. I love you too, she whispered back. More than words can ever express. Promise me you'll be safe. That you'll remember you have someone here who needs you to come home. William nodded solemnly, understanding the weight of her words and the responsibility they carried. The driver cleared his throat softly, indicating that they needed to leave to make the flight on time. William and Catherine shared one last, lingering kiss, pouring all their love and hopes for the future into that single moment. When they finally parted, both were struggling to maintain their composure. The drive to the airport passed in a blur of London streets and quiet conversation. Catherine sat close to William in the back seat of the royal car, her hand resting in his as they watched the familiar landmarks pass by. Neither spoke much, both lost in their own thoughts about the months ahead. The weight of their temporary separation hung between them like an unspoken prayer. William found himself studying Catherine's profile as she gazed out the window. He wanted to memorize every detail, the way her eyelashes caught the light, the gentle curve of her smile when she noticed children playing in a park they passed, the unconscious way she twisted her wedding ring when she was thinking deeply about something. Do you remember our first long separation? Catherine asked suddenly, turning to meet his gaze. William smiled, his mind traveling back to those early days of their relationship when he was stationed at RAF Valley in Wales. You wrote me letters every day, he recalled. Real letters, not emails or texts. I still have every one of them. Catherine laughed softly, a sound that warmed William's heart. You were so formal in your replies at first, she teased. All proper and princely until I told you I missed your terrible jokes. William chuckled, remembering how nervous he had been about expressing his feelings in writing, worried that somehow his words would be seen by others or misunderstood. I was trying so hard to be what I thought you needed, William admitted. It took me far too long to realize you just wanted me to be myself. Catherine squeezed his hand, her thumb tracing circles on his palm in the comforting gesture she had done countless times over the years. The car began to slow as they approached the private terminal at Heathrow Airport. Through the tinted windows, they could see the royal aircraft waiting on the tarmac, its engines already warming up for the long journey ahead. William felt his stomach tighten with a mixture of anticipation for his mission and dread at leaving Catherine behind. I have something for you too, William said, reaching into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a small leather journal, its cover worn smooth from handling. I've been writing in this since we got engaged, he explained. Thoughts, memories, moments I never wanted to forget. I want you to have it while I'm gone so you'll know that you're in my thoughts every single day. Catherine accepted the journal with trembling hands, feeling the weight of his words and the years of memories contained within its pages. William, I can't take this, she protested. These are your private thoughts. But William shook his head firmly. My thoughts are your thoughts, he said. My heart is your heart. There's nothing in there I wouldn't share with you. The car came to a complete stop beside the aircraft stairs. William's private secretary approached the vehicle, along with several other officials who would be accompanying him on the tour. Catherine could see them through the window, all business and efficiency, waiting to whisk her husband away to his duties. Mrs. Catherine, the driver said gently, we can take a few more minutes if you need them. Catherine smiled gratefully at the older man who had driven them to countless engagements over the years. His kindness in this moment meant more to her than he could possibly know. William stepped out of the car first, then extended his hand to help Catherine. The autumn air was crisp and carried the scent of jet fuel and approaching rain. Catherine pulled her coat tighter around herself as they walked slowly toward the aircraft, neither eager to reach their destination. As they climbed the stairs to the plane's entrance, Catherine marveled at how surreal the moment felt. She had said goodbye to William countless times before, when he left for military exercises, royal engagements, or personal trips. But something about this departure felt monumental. Perhaps it was the length of time they would be apart, or maybe it was simply the accumulation of all their shared experiences making this separation feel more significant. Inside the aircraft, William's staff busied themselves with final preparations while the couple found a quiet corner to share their last few minutes together. The plane's interior was comfortable but utilitarian, designed more for efficiency than luxury. Catherine ran her fingers along the edge of the window seat where William would spend so many hours over the coming months. "I've asked James to send you photos from every stop," William said, referring to his personal photographer who would be documenting the tour. "I want you to see everything I see, to feel like you're there with me somehow." Catherine nodded, touched by his thoughtfulness but also saddened by the reminder that she would only be experiencing his journey secondhand. "The children have made you something," Catherine said, thinking of the young students from the school she patronized who had spent weeks creating a special book for William's trip. "It's in your luggage, drawings and letters wishing you safe travels. They made me promise to tell you that they're proud of you for representing their country." William's eyes filled with tears at the thought of those children, many of whom came from disadvantaged backgrounds but still took the time to create something special for him. It was moments like these that reminded him why his work mattered, why the sacrifices he and Catherine made were worthwhile. A gentle announcement over the intercom indicated that they needed to prepare for departure. William's private secretary approached them respectfully, clearly reluctant to interrupt but bound by duty to keep the schedule on track. "Your Royal Highness, we need to begin our final preparations," he said softly. Catherine stood up from the seat where she had been sitting beside William, smoothing down her skirt and gathering her composure. She had made it this far without completely breaking down, and she was determined to send William off with strength and grace, rather than tears and sorrow. "Go," she said firmly, though her voice wavered slightly. "Go and do what you do best. Represent our country with dignity, and bring home stories that will make me proud." William stood as well, pulling Catherine into his arms for what they both knew would be their final embrace for many months. They held each other tightly, neither speaking, both trying to pour 6 months' worth of love and support into this single moment. Catherine could feel William's heart beating against her chest, strong and steady, and she tried to memorize the rhythm to comfort herself during the lonely nights ahead. When they finally pulled apart, both had tears streaming down their faces. William wiped Catherine's cheeks gently with his thumbs, his touch tender and reverent. "I'll call you as soon as I land," he promised. Catherine nodded, not trusting her voice to remain steady if she tried to speak. She walked with him to the aircraft door, where they shared one final kiss. This time, there was no restraint, no concern for propriety or who might be watching. It was a kiss filled with love, longing, and the promise of reunion. When they broke apart, Catherine stepped back to allow William to board the plane fully. "I love you," she called out as he paused in the doorway. William turned back one last time, his silhouette framed against the aircraft's interior lighting. "I love you too," he called back, "always and forever." With that, he disappeared into the plane, and Catherine heard the sound of the door being secured for takeoff. Catherine stood on the tarmac as the aircraft's engines roared to life, the sound drowning out everything else around her. Her hair whipped around her face in the wind created by the powerful jets, but she remained perfectly still, watching as the plane slowly began to taxi toward the runway. The afternoon sun had given way to gathering clouds, and the first drops of rain began to fall as if the sky itself was mourning their separation. The palace security team respectfully maintained their distance, allowing Catherine these final moments to watch her husband's departure. She pulled the leather journal William had given her closer to her chest, feeling its weight against her heart. Through the small aircraft windows, she caught a glimpse of movement and knew William was looking back at her, though she couldn't make out his features from this distance. As the plane picked up speed and lifted gracefully into the gray London sky, Catherine felt a piece of her heart soar away with it. She stood there long after the aircraft had disappeared into the clouds, raindrops mixing with the tears on her cheeks. Only when her protection officer gently touched her arm did she realize how long she had been standing there. The drive back to Kensington Palace was quiet and somber. Catherine stared out the window at the bustling streets of London, watching people go about their daily lives. Completely unaware that her world had just shifted on its axis, she wondered how many of them had ever experienced the ache of watching someone they loved disappear into the distance, not knowing exactly when they would see them again. Back at the palace, the familiar rooms felt different somehow, larger and emptier, despite nothing having changed in the few hours since William left. Catherine walked through their private quarters, her footsteps echoing in the silence. She paused in William's study, where his reading glasses still sat on the desk beside a half-finished crossword puzzle they had been working on together the night before. Mrs. Henderson knocked softly on the door, entering with a tea tray and the kind of gentle concern that only came from years of caring for the family. "I thought you might like some tea, Your Royal Highness," she said, setting the tray down on the small table by the window. "I've also taken the liberty of preparing a light dinner for later." "Thank you," Catherine said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mrs. Henderson, how did you manage when your husband was deployed during the war?" The older woman's eyes softened with understanding and memory. "One day at a time, ma'am," she replied. "One day at a time, and the knowledge that love doesn't diminish with distance. If anything, it grows stronger." Catherine nodded, finding comfort in the housekeeper's wisdom. She had always admired the woman's practical approach to life's challenges, and now she needed that strength more than ever. After Mrs. Henderson left, Catherine poured herself a cup of tea and opened William's journal to the first page. His familiar handwriting filled the pages, neat and careful, with occasional words crossed out and rewritten. The first entry was dated the day after their engagement was announced, and as Catherine read his words, she felt his presence beside her as clearly as if he were sitting in the room. Asterisk, "Today changed everything." Asterisk, he had written. Asterisk, "Not because we're engaged. I've known I wanted to marry Catherine for years, but because I finally understand the weight of sharing this life with someone I love." She said yes not just to me, but to everything that comes with being part of this family, this institution. I hope I can be worthy of her courage. Asterisk, Catherine smiled through her tears, remembering that day and the mix of excitement and terror she had felt. William had proposed during a quiet weekend in Kenya, away from the pressures and expectations of royal life. She had known, even then, that saying yes meant stepping into a world where their personal moments would always be secondary to duty and service. As evening fell, Catherine moved to their bedroom and settled against the pillows on William's side of the bed, continuing to read his journal. Each entry revealed thoughts and feelings he had never shared aloud. His worries about being a good husband, his pride in her accomplishments, his hopes for their future together. She discovered that he had written about their first fight, their first Christmas together, and countless small moments she had forgotten but he had treasured enough to record. The phone rang at exactly 9 o'clock, just as William had promised. Catherine answered before the first ring had finished, desperate to hear his voice. "I made it safely," were his first words, and Catherine could hear the exhaustion and emotion in his tone. "The flight felt endless, but reading your letters from our early days helped pass the time." "How are the accommodations?" Catherine asked, though she didn't really care about the practical details. She just wanted to keep him talking, to maintain this connection across the thousands of miles between them. William described his temporary quarters and the schedule for the following day, but both of them were really just marking time until they could say what they truly felt. "I miss you already," William said finally, his voice breaking slightly. "I know it's only been a few hours, but the bed feels wrong without you in it. Everything feels wrong." Catherine closed her eyes, pressing the phone closer to her ear as if that could somehow bring him closer. "I'm reading your journal," she confessed. "I hope you don't mind, but I needed to feel close to you somehow. William, these entries, you've captured so many moments I thought only I remembered." William was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was thick with emotion. "Keep reading," he said. "And Catherine, start writing your own entries while I'm gone. I want to know every detail of your days, every thought you have, so that when I come home, we can piece together these months we've lost together." They talked for over an hour, neither wanting to be the first to hang up. They discussed Catherine's upcoming engagements, William's first official meetings, and the weather in both London and his current location. But underneath the mundane conversation was a current of longing that made every word precious. "I should let you get some sleep," Catherine said eventually, though it was the last thing she wanted to do. "You have an early morning, and I know how important these first meetings are." William sighed, and she could picture him running his hand through his hair the way he always did when he was tired. "I love you, Catherine," he said, and she could hear him settling into bed thousands of miles away. "I love you more than I knew it was possible to love another person. Sweet dreams, my darling." Catherine whispered her love back to him, and then the line went quiet, leaving her alone with the sound of rain against the windows. She set the phone on William's pillow and returned to his journal, reading by lamplight until her eyes grew heavy. The last entry she read before falling asleep was from just 2 weeks earlier. Asterisk, watched Catherine in the garden this morning, completely absorbed in her thoughts as she tended to her roses. She doesn't know I was there. Doesn't know I spent 20 minutes just observing the graceful way she moves, the peaceful expression on her face. These are the moments I treasure most, seeing her simply being herself, unguarded and beautiful. I wish I could capture every one of these ordinary, extraordinary moments and keep them forever. Asterisk. As Catherine finally drifted off to sleep, still wearing the clothes she had worn to see him off, she realized that William already had captured those moments, in his journal, in his heart, and now in hers as well. The coming months would test their love in new ways, but they would also prove what she already knew, that true love transcends distance, time, and even duty. Tomorrow would begin the countdown to his return, and she would mark each day with the same devotion he had shown in recording their life together.